Throughout childhood, I received clear and regular instruction on how to feel guilt and shame. The lessons mostly delivered with strong religious associations and designed to stimulate a deep sense of disgrace for thinking or acting in particular ways. You may have received similar guilt training. And yet, guilt is not always a harmful emotion. It can be a catalyst for self-assessment, prompting changes in our behaviour. Owning our guilt is an important step toward emotional maturity. My guilt is a personal burden that I alone must accept and address. You cannot take my guilt and make it yours, and I am certainly not responsible for what you choose to do. Any disparity between my good and bad behaviour is mine to rebalance. This is the foundation principle guiding any system of justice. On that, I'm sure we can agree. Christians disagree on many details across the various versions of their faith, but on one point there is not universal, but certainly widespread agreement, and that is the doctrine of atonement, which occupies a central position within Christian thought. It defends the belief that through the sacrificial death of the Nazarene Jesus, humanity's sins are forgiven. This doctrine provides the basis for much of the content in Christian rites and observances such as baptism, eucharist, and funerals, and the repetitious prayer of confession and absolution. Atonement is the act of making amends for wrongdoing. The doctrine of atonement insists that everyone must confess and atone for their sins, each of which is treated as a personal crime against the God. But luckily, according to the doctrine, the Nazarene endured all the suffering necessary to make amends on behalf of sinful humanity. So why do Christians believe that people need this godly forgiveness? One well-favoured explanation is that all human beings are born corrupt, a characteristic supposedly inherited from Adam and Eve, who almost certainly never existed. An obvious weakness in the idea of inherited guilt is that it undermines personal responsibility, allowing me to shift liability for my infractions onto some unlikely mythical ancestors. It's patently absurd to argue that all human beings are born bad. Such a belief conflicts with the equally questionable idea that everyone is made in the image of the God. Given the plethora of opinions about what the God is like, in whose version of the image are we made? Some insist that the God is all-knowing and jealous and all-powerful and vengeful, while others swear that the God is all-loving. Love and vengeance are incompatible. If unconditional love is in fact a defining characteristic of the God, then it is reasonable to expect unconditional forgiveness for every bad thing ever done by everyone. Such a generous act of forgiveness would strengthen the claim that the God is better in all respects than every human being that ever lived and died. Setting aside conventional religious assumptions about guilt and punishment, everyone has the capacity to make moral choices. Everyone is responsible for their own actions and any consequent effect on others. The only reasonable exception being diminished mental capacity. And I, for one, prefer not to argue that particular defence. Acknowledging deeply ingrained, conflicted religious attitudes toward guilt and punishment, it is a better thing to re-examine the base beliefs on which our opinions and positions are founded, recognising that religion and morality are not interchangeable terms. Religious people are not always moral, and moral people are not always religious. I am Roger James.